Hi, everyone. So glad to have you join us for our artist talk for the Art Against Violence exhibit here at the New Haven Pride Center. I'm Miranda. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I'm the LGBTQ Women's Program Officer here at the Pride Center. I'm also a queer woman. I'm a Jewish woman. I'm a survivor of partner violence, and I like to think of myself as an aspiring artist, mostly with the written word, but I also love painting and art and photography and video design and graphics. And I'm so excited to have been able to be a part of putting the show together on a theme that is very near and dear to my art, with our partners at Nasty Women Connecticut, BH Care, and the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, addressing all forms of violence that impact the LGBTQ community here in Connecticut, across the United States, and across the globe. So thank you so much for joining us today. I would also like to introduce my co-host for this, Luciana. We'll drop her in. Luciana McClure is an independent contemporary art curator, activist, educator, and practicing artist. She is the founding organizer of the Nasty Women movement in Connecticut and leads Nasty Women Connecticut. Luciana is an immigrant of Brazil, and she currently resides in Connecticut, where she is currently pursuing a Master of Arts in Women and Gender Studies at Southern Connecticut State University, where she also works as a graduate teaching assistant. Luciana is a board member of ArtSpace New Haven, a member of College Art Association, the Connecticut Regional Coordinator at the Feminist Art Project, and most recently, a board member at the New Haven Pride Center. Thank you so much, Luciana.
Thank you, Miranda. It's really great to be here. Thank you for the lovely introduction also.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you and to be co-hosting this conversation together. It's a pleasure. And honestly, anyone that you teach as a graduate teaching assistant is so lucky to have you as a mentor in their life.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Max, whose bio I pulled from the website because I'm going to call him out for not sending me his arts bio. Max, who uses he, him, his, and they, them, theirs pronouns, is a non-binary Latinx queer man and community organizer, originally hailing from Stamford, Connecticut. Although he was born in Mexico, Max and his family immigrated to southwestern Connecticut in 1987. That experience of learning a new culture while affirming your own is a core theme throughout Max's career. At Stamford High School, he helped found and served as vice president for Hugs, helping unite gays and straights. Starting in 2015, Max worked at Mid-Fairfield AIDS Project in Nora, Connecticut as an administrative assistant, and used that position to build a social media marketing office, an HIV testing supervisor role, a volunteer program, and a newsletter. Since then, he's moved on to work on political campaigns for progressive candidates and works to organize small business owners who happen to be undocumented. Currently, Max works at Open Door Shelter in Norwalk, where he brings that experience of learning new cultures while affirming his own. He's also our amazing Latinx program officer, and Max comes to us as an extraordinary talented artist, here today working in the medium of collage. So welcome, Max.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate that that really long introduction. Now,
you wrote your own bio.
I didn't give the bio. All the more reason why I feel like now folks who actually read all that feel like, all right, we covered a lot of ground there. So all the more reason why. And thank you for holding me accountable. But this is really awesome to have this conversation, and it's really timely, I think, to be able to have this conversation because a lot of folks are thinking about how to fight violence. And peaceful ways, and art has a way of doing that. So thank you for having this, both you, Luciana and Miranda. I appreciate you
so much. Yeah, thank you for submitting your artwork. Next up, we have Jewel, who uses she, her pronouns. Jewel's a rising senior at New Haven Academy. For her Black is Beautiful piece, she created it the day there was a protest for Black Lives Matter in her town. She could not go out to the protest, so she sat in the house and created a piece that explained how she felt about the matter. She thinks Black is beautiful, and it doesn't matter who it is. She wanted it to show how much you can understand a person before you even get to speak to them, which is why her eyes are covered with the message that she wants to display. As for her tree, her other piece, it was the final for her literature class. The project was based on social identities, so she took the idea of all of her identities and put it into the tree, with the root being where she learned things about her identities, and the leaves being her understanding and blossoming of everything that she had learned. There's also leaves of things she wants people to understand about being a mixed person, and answering their usual questions before they get to ask. Thank you so much, Jewel, for joining us.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then finally, we have the amazing Charlotte, who also uses she, her pronouns. Charlotte is thrilled to be a part of her first art show ever with the New Haven Pride Center. She's been entering for the Pride Center Director of Case Management Support Services, Juan Carlos Soto, since May 2020. After graduating from Yale University in the spring, Charlotte moved to Bozeman, Montana to work as a nanny. The work was inspired by something a friend said to her a few years ago when she was struggling with her sexuality and mental health. Called up to the light, the sentence says, "You don't need to explain yourself to me," and it appears behind the person's face. When her friend said this to her, she felt like she could just be herself without worrying about defining who she was to herself or anyone else. By painting this person in the colors of the Bi Pride flag, she practices understanding her own queerness as legitimate and celebratory, the water she swims in, and not something that can be separated, turned on or off. While the painting portrays only one person, the words behind the painting invoke, for her, the love and warmth of her friend and support system who inspired this piece of art against violence. Thank you so much for joining us, Charlotte.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So to begin our talk, I'd like all of our artists to take a couple of minutes and talk about your work in more detail, how you responded to the theme of art against violence and what your work and the message of it is. So we'll begin with Max, not to put you on the spot too much, but also
Bring it on. Let's see. So I came to this really as a kind of like purely therapeutic value. I had a lot of magazines, a lot of newspapers, because news junkie. And when I started working in an aid service organization, I'm talking about a specific piece here, which kind of like pretty much tracks the journey of how I got to doing this kind of work. I worked in an aid service organization in Norwalk for about 5 years, and in that time, I learned a lot about data. I learned a lot about information and how grants go back and forth, and I learned a lot about the inclusion of folks who are HIV positive in the work and the service that's being done for them, with them, and I thought, wow, there's a lot here as far as information, as far as biology, we have that, right? But I felt like as an HIV positive queer brown individual, I thought there's not enough in terms of emotional remedy. Like we know how to remedy the body, we know things about biology, but we didn't know enough about. I felt like there wasn't enough space to be able to kind of like help me heal, or at least help me feel like even though I'm still HIV positive, I can still heal. So I created a space in this collage to do that. That's what I wanted to do. As I was doing it, I was literally cutting them out of magazines that would be in the waiting room of the AIDS services organization. So as I'm reading, I'm also looking at the images along with the articles, and I'm going, this would go well with this. And what I was beginning to realize is that the space that I was creating, and the reason why I came to anti-violence, this piece was so like pointed to be put in the anti-violence exhibition, because I thought, the structural violence due to the ways that I feel an HIV positive person, I don't think gets noticed a lot, mentioned a lot. So I wanted to create a space where I can begin to heal myself. And so I created that, and it's been 3 years since I've had that collage. And I have to say that in that time, I came to really appreciate what I was able to put together, with very little formal education, but the feeling was there, and that was enough to carry me through. So I just wanted to show a little bit of the piece because even though it started out as me putting images together, it slowly began to form a kind of like a healing space for me. So to be able to bring it to the anti-violence, art against violence exhibition really did it just felt right. So and it's also my first exhibition where I'm displaying my stuff. So that feels it feels really special to be able to do it here with y'all.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Max. And how about Jewel? We got to hear a little bit about your piece in your bio. If you want to talk about it in some more depth.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I did the painting back in June. It started off as like I was tracing this girl. She did have a line to her eye because she had a butterfly on her tongue. But it took me so long to make it because I'm so bad at like drawing, like I can't draw faces. So that was my first time like ever creating someone's face and shading it. And the day that I was painting it, there was a Black Lives Matter movement. It was on the West Haven Green. I was right there. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, you should come." I'm like, I can't. I'm not allowed to. I can't go. My mom thinks it's going to be dangerous, so I can't go. So instead, I sat in the house and I started painting it. And I didn't have the words for the eyes at first. I was trying to figure out, but it came to me at the end when I finished painting everything else, and I kept hearing people down the street shouting Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. So that's it. So that's how I came across the Black is Beautiful. And this is also my first art exhibition. I actually came across the Pride Center because I was writing with the arts paper with Lucy, and she kept putting me on to like, I told her I really wanted to write about like the LGBTQ community because I'm part of it. And she kept putting me on to like these calls, and I was like, that is so cool. I never thought I was going to be in them. Oh no, I never thought I was going to be in them because I don't like putting my art out there. But I started and I kept writing about you guys to like start getting out, and like I know I can't like get it out everywhere about, you know, how great the New Haven Pride Center is, but like I started in like my Instagram community, my Snapchat, I was posting on my articles, and then I submitted the girl, and then everybody loved it, and I was like, wow. Wow. It shocked me about how many people loved it, and I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's my piece.
Yeah, it was an amazing piece, and I'm so glad that you had the confidence to submit that. It was really amazing, and yeah, I think you and Max and Charlotte submitted these pieces that are just so healing to look at, and I think they're all incredibly beautiful. So thank you, all three of you, for that. All right, awesome. And then last but not least, we have Charlotte. So tell us a little bit more about your work.
Yeah. So mine is like was mentioned in my bio. It's sort of a human face, and then 3 stripes of the bi pride flag right there. And then if you hold it up to the light, behind it comes through, which I painted backwards on the back of the canvas. It says, "You don't need to explain yourself to me," which was way more complicated than I thought it was going to be to write it backwards. I did like have to play around with that to make sure it came out all right. But yeah, so for me, the stripes, kind of the way I painted it with acrylics, I love the way it kind of looks like water in a little bit. So I was just sort of thinking about well, actually, from the workshop that we did with Siobhan and Miranda, I was thinking about like affirming my own identity, and so the water I swim in, it's who I am, and yeah, and the words are from a friend of mine who has been a support for many years now, and I feel that way with my broader community and with the New Haven Pride Center. So I'm thrilled to be able to be a part of this art show.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That piece is gorgeous. I'm glad to kind of see it in more full detail here, because I only got to see the photos of it before from the submission. We blame the U.S. Postal Service for the delay in your
Seriously.
But, if you couldn't catch our initial guided tour, you can still check it out on YouTube. And if you're based in New Haven or in Southern Connecticut and want to come on down, you can reserve hours to come see our show at newhavenpridecenter.org. Come with a group of friends, be it socially distanced and keep it safe, wear your masks, and come see all of this amazing art in person and all of its glory. Well, thank you both. Thank you, the three of you, so much for being here today and for introducing your amazing artwork and just for participating in this show. I'm going to hand it off to Luciana to begin with some questions for our artists. And at any time, if anyone watching wants to pose their own questions, we'll be moderating and facilitating that.
Awesome. Hi again, everyone. And I just want to reiterate what Miranda said about thank you for, sharing your work, but also, becoming so vulnerable through exposing your ideas, your thoughts, and really yourself, bearing that into your artwork. And I think it takes so much courage, especially when it's, you're bearing so much of yourself. So thank you for that. And so I guess I have a couple of different questions, but I guess I'm curious about how, if each one of you can talk about the process of how is it that you started the process of utilizing the arts as a way of expressing yourself? Like, when is it the first day that art became a part of it, of like a daily practice, or it became a part of like, this is something that you do, and then you realize that that's also part of your healing journey. But also, like, I think I'm always curious how one realized that, art is something that I need. It's kind of like a lifeline. And I think everyone has always a very unique story to tell. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. We can start with Charlotte. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I didn't really start doing any art until like middle school, and then an art teacher had us do an exercise of doing self-portraits. And one thing she said was, when you're drawing yourself, try and include the things that you don't even like about the way your face looks or something, so that way it shows exactly who you are, because you may not think highly of it, but other people recognize that in you and see it as beautiful in you. And so that, I feel like, has carried throughout, like, since 8th grade or whatever for me. And I think that I think art in a lot of ways is sort of taking stuff that may not be good or whatever in the world, and trying to make something beautiful out of it. And I think that process for me is very important to kind of, seeing the way through things, seeing the bright side of things. Yeah.
Thank you. Jewel?
Okay, so I went to Betsy Ross Arts Magnet School, and throughout my whole life, I've been so bad with like public speaking. I've been getting better, but I've been so bad at public speaking, standing up for myself, because like I never like had it in my head to just the words to come out. It takes me a while to think before I could say something. So when I started creating art, I went to ECA my freshman and sophomore year, and I walked in and I thought it was gonna be like hip hop, and they were like, no, this art is explaining feelings. The dances, they're not supposed to be like entertaining. They're supposed to show a message. So I was like, I could do that with my artwork. So I started creating pieces where like I don't have to speak about them. People who just like see, and they can like understand what I'm talking about. And I lost my train of thought. Because I don't like going to people and expressing myself and telling them how I feel. I'd rather show you instead of like speaking about it, because then the words don't come out right, and then it doesn't make sense. So that's what I did for my Black is Beautiful. That's what I did for my Mixed Tree piece, because I don't like talking about myself and how I feel.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I think it's in hearing Charlotte, hearing you speak too, it's like it's such a unique journey, but also like how the different ways in which we hope the work will speak for itself, and it was like the other voice that we developed through our artwork and through our creative practice and expression. Thank you.
Yeah,
Max?
yeah. So that's definitely something that I kind of like. I can relate with that. Like I mentioned earlier, I got no real formal education when it comes to art, but I didn't let that hold me back. And still, I think that I know for me, I should use I statements. I can be really hard on myself, and I don't celebrate myself and my work as much as I know I could. And I'd imagine I'm not alone in that, So for me, what art brings for me is not just a sense of celebration, but also this kind of like space. There's a space that's missing. Then we create a collage. Maybe that'll create a space. Maybe somebody else will want to be invited into it. And so that's kind of that's what it brings to me, like when I don't do a collage, I call them posters because I try to make them pretty big. But when I don't do a poster in like a few months, I start to feel physically bad. I start to feel like I need this, I need to burst out, and so that's why I need it. I need it to create that space so I can walk in it and be in there because sometimes it's not easy being out here, you know what I'm saying? So like I can definitely relate with that process of like being hard on ourselves. But I also can appreciate that I'm not going to let that stop me from expressing myself, And so it's very interesting that we're talking about anti-violence or we're talking about art against violence, because to me, the way I see it, I suppose, is that all that I'm not good enough, all that I'm not, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve, it's violent, right? So this art has a way of bursting at it. Like for me, my work has a way of bursting out of that, through that violence, saying, no, I belong here, I have a space here, and I'm going to build it. And others are invited into it. So for me, it's like I need it, and it's something I feel really enriched by.
Thank you. I think that it's all really moving to hear, and also understanding and looking through each one of your works, you can also see, there's like also world and natural energy that each of one of you bring. Charlotte, you talk about this kind of like moving and wave, kind of like of going when you have like the flag, but also the figure. Kind of blending into one. Jewel, you have the tree. The sense. There's like this nature, and Max, you have all these different fragments and all these different parts, and so it's like really, and I guess I'm thinking about a little bit like when I see, especially Charlotte and Jewel, when I see about your work, thinking about your relationship with nature and the earth, and as Max was saying, there is this also the violence that we experience as human beings, but also the violence that the world, that we respond to when the world has experienced so much violence, whether it is the earth, whether it's ourselves. And I wanted to hear a little bit from each one of you about that, about what do you feel that it's, let me phrase this in the right way. It's, how do you feel, as an artist, and as a person, like, how is it like to respond, to, what is the power in responding, to violence? And do you think that artists should do that? Do you think that artists have a duty to respond, in these times? So therefore making your art more political, more activist oriented, and kind of bridging that line between art and activism. Does that make sense? And each one of you can respond however which one of you is ready.
I'll give a brief one, because while I still have it in my head, is that I think part of the process for me is that that like there is there's a clear established, you have to check all these boxes, you have to sound correct, you have to be professional, you have to and then of course there's are you going to sell your work? And then there's the whole money piece, which is its own violent process, because art is, to me, it just feels like I'm not making it to sell. But still, I think that part of the response is, my response is, I'm going to purely bring myself. I'm going to bring myself in a pure way. And that's going to be my response. That's how I can make it kind of like be anti-violent, that I'm going to create a space where I can be all of my identities and feel comfortable being all of my identities. And I think having that space is kind of like, Jenny said, I'm all over the place right now, but Jenny said Gutierrez has this saying, which I love, which my existence is resistance. Mi existencia es resistencia. So just creating that space is a resistance to that. Just creating that space is saying, no, I'm not going to be taken in by you, not today. So, and every time I look at, particularly the HIV one, I call it mind remedy. Every time I look at it, I feel a little bit more healed, and that's my response to it, I guess, in a way to answer.
Thank you. It's really moving. Thank you. Charlotte or Jewel? Miranda, you should also pitch in if there's something else in the middle too.
No, I've been thinking, I really love that quote. La existencia es la resistencia. I really love that quote. Thinking about how, especially as LGBTQ folks in the community, our bodies, our love, our identities are so politicized, as is, and to sort of heal ourselves and to work on that inner work, and embracing who we are and thinking of that as its own political act. And I think that really speaks to the work that all three of you did, especially Charlotte and Jewel. This work about really being, Black is beautiful, and you don't have to explain yourself to me. Really coming through with those messages, and sort of being political in your own identities, as opposed to just, you know, forcing as a response to the current times, because everything is political always, isn't it? Like we think of it as something that is more recently on our minds, but it's, you know, it's always a part of, you know, who we are and our experience and our way we walk through the world. So I got very distracted by the cat tail there.
Always likes to walk for some reason in front of this screen, and it's worth to fight it.
You're all good. Cats are little demons. Cute.
But I like what you were saying, Miranda, about like, you know, when we talk about like, you know, the work and how, you know, there's something really empowering, and you're right, and it is how you're not allowed, neither of you are allowing yourselves to be policed, and also and to apologize for your work. You know, it's kind of like, this is the work, this is who I am, and I think that's a beautiful way to combat, you know, the violence that sometimes society puts on us, all these expectations, and also having to fall into a category to be in one way in order to be accepted, even when it means to, oh, what is your narrative as an artist, as a creative person. And the thing is, the beauty is that we each have our own journey, we each have our own voice, and in a way that's resisting, you know, norms and expectations, and fighting against that.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think definitely like art is, like in times of like stress and violence, like art is a way to combat that. And I think also everyone kind of lifting up artists in that time, because it does take a lot of emotional labor and it is very vulnerable to put yourself out there. And so to only accept art when it is like worth a lot of money or something like that, I don't think is like quite enough. You have to sort of be lifting up artists, when you see them putting themselves out there, which I think it was more on your first question, but yeah.
I have a question for you all then. We keep using this word vulnerable, and I was just wondering how you managed to find that space and get to a point where you felt comfort in that vulnerability, or at least were able to face up to it and whatever, you know, fears and boundaries that you were running into around being so vulnerable. If any of you want to respond to that.
Well,
Charlotte on the spot here, because you just kind of talked about that vulnerability of artists, and I was wondering if, you know, how you found that kind of safety to be vulnerable in your work.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I think for me in my piece, having that, like having been vulnerable with my friend and having them affirm and accept and just like allow me to exist, was definitely sort of a signal to me that I could give myself permission to be vulnerable. And so I think kind of, that's where that came from for me. But it's a tough thing. I'm not really sure what the complete answer would be.
Oh, that'll work.
I could speak. Okay. So for how I overcame that was because when I was growing up, I was like never Black enough, because I'm mixed. So I'm white, I'm Italian, I'm also Puerto Rican. So I always got told, you're not Black, you're mixed, which doesn't make sense. It doesn't. But that's what I was always told. So when I created the piece and I sent it to my one friend, and they posted it without my permission. But they posted it and I started getting the feedback. They were like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. It's so strong. It's so powerful. So then I kind of overcame the big, are people going to like it? Are people going to talk about it? Are people going to tell me I shouldn't have made it because I'm not Black enough? But it really helped me. My friends do when they post my artwork and they support me, because it helps me better think that like people will like my work and they'll understand it and I don't have to like feel bad about it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't think it's tough dealing with audience, like, and understand like who's the audience when we create art, and why are we creating, and you know, and I invite you all to think about, like, don't think you have to please people with your work, be, you have honor, you are, incredible, and your work is powerful because it was created by you, because it's like your raw self, like just pouring into it. And because you know what, somewhere inside of you had this fire that was saying, I have to create this. And I think and we're all so grateful for that, because every time an artist does that, it is inspiring another artist to do the same. Because the art world and the world, that can be so tough on us, to the point that we are terrified to just be vulnerable, or to say, to expose our ideas. And and we should not be afraid of it. So okay, just saying that. So thank you, all of you.
If I could just add real quick that uh, I put enough thought in the collages that I submitted to be able to create that space with intention. But watching the virtual tour that Miranda did, earlier this week, I believe, watching that virtual tour and how she was explaining the work, and really made me feel seen. Like I didn't give a description or a meaning as to, but she saw me, and all she did was look at a collage. Well, not just that, but what I mean to say is that I was seen, I felt heard. And that made me feel really like, wow, you know what, I do belong up here on this wall. And so I recognize that, and that made me feel really like I have a space. So I appreciate, and it's kind of corny to say, I know, but there is strength in vulnerability. I think that it doesn't get the kind of rap that I wish that phenomena got more celebrated more. But I think that in our society today, vulnerability has a way of bursting. Bye, Bubbles. Be well. And I think that strength to be able to, like, hey, I'm not saying I'm weak. I'm saying I'm recognizing the chinks in my armor, and being able to recognize that gives you strength. And so art, I feel like, provides a way to kind of like say, all right, I'm holding myself accountable here, but I'm also not choosing to be hard on myself. I'm going to celebrate those chinks, And so I think that adds to our strength. That adds to, and when another artist sees it, oh, it just makes it all that much better. So I want to just add that.
Yeah, my mom, or was it my stepdad? One of my parents used to tell me that if you have chinks in your armor, it's because you fought some battles and survived. And so I really like the idea of celebrating the chinks in your own armor. And another thing that I wanted to point out that came up in all of your responses, and I'm so glad that I was able to be this person for you, Max. That makes me like, it's like, oh, I feel like I succeeded if I could help you feel seen. This your work was so amazing. All of your work was just so amazing. Is that you all sort of mentioned this idea of like community and other people that like came through to support you, and I think that's just one of the most beautiful things about the LGBTQ community when it comes together, is that we uplift each other, and we give ourselves that space to be vulnerable and to find that strength with one another, and that it's not this solo, isolated, lone artist kind of thing that we have to do. We can all kind of be there for each other and help each other feel seen. And I think this is like one of the most, it's the best part of working at the Pride Center. And it's, the best part of having all of you here today is that we get to uplift each other in this way. And that's how we, we fight violence as a team. And I love that.
Yeah, I think especially now, I think in these times that we're all feeling like, I think our vulnerability is like, I think it's even like, pouring out. And it's hard to navigate the emotions on a day to day, with the world and ourselves, and to have a space for that. And I feel that that's, it's very powerful to be able to do that, to be able to speak, to be able to express, to be able to have a space where you feel held and you feel understood and seen, because I think we all need that. And I think we benefit from that. I think it makes us stronger and allows us to become even more vulnerable and realize that that's a strength. You want to be vulnerable. You want to feel, yeah, I guess it's like what Miranda was saying, the healing in the art, too.
Yeah.
Thinking about the concept of identity that comes through this. If it's not too much to share, but is there a time a particular thing that came to mind where you felt like you were struggling with your identity in some way, or you felt that this sort of like sense of violence against those identities, and how did you work through the time more broadly, through art or through other means? How did you kind of come to the other side of that? It's a little bit of a heavy question, so sorry if we need to ponder.
Oh, and I feel that Jewel tapped a little bit into that when she was talking about, her identity and this having to like justify, am I more of this or more of that? And that when you said that, Jewel, I actually relate to that because of also being mixed, but being Brazilian. And so it's kind of like Brazilian being Latin and sometimes not looking as Latin. And some people say, well, why are you Latin enough? And this idea that we have to justify our identity, or in the fact that there is one way to look or to be in order to fit into this box and this definition. And the thing is, it's like so crazy, and I feel that that's a violence that is done to us, and that's the beauty when you respond with your work. By the roots, the grounding, the self in nature. And so, yeah. I'm passing up.
I think it's crazy. I hate like when I tell people what I am, and they're like, but you don't speak Spanish, but you don't speak Italian, you don't look Italian. So I hate when they do that. I don't know how to like show them. Like, I can't just like pull back my skin and be like, look, this is my part that's Italian, this is my part that's Black. So I understand that.
Yeah, identity is a tricky thing. And I think, and when you're saying Jewel, and I'm sure, Max can also mention Charlotte, and even in Miranda, you too, is like, what is it about our identities, that we feel that we have to defend, but at the same time, it's like we want to honor who we are, but also we don't want to feel that we're conforming to one's idea of how we should be or how we should fit in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Charlotte had something to say, but I'll bounce back.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, trying to.
No, not at all. I was just gonna say, for me, it was I think reading about other people's lives and reading their words or how they put their thoughts on certain their identities into words. Like, I had never really, I remember reading one particular essay and being like, oh my gosh, this is exactly how I feel. I didn't know that other people felt this way. And since then, that essay has I've realized, oh, this is how I'm different from this person. Obviously, I'm a different person, but kind of being able to jump from that point into a better place of self-perception and acceptance. That's sort of what I'd say.
Yeah, in terms of, I definitely had a similar experience of someone who I really admire. I met them at a conference one time, and they were the first person that I talked to who, I had met a lot of people who identified as non-binary, use they, them, theirs pronouns, but I was having trouble kind of coming to terms with this idea of the both and in terms of identity and gender and who I could be, and that you can kind of contain multitudes within yourself. And this person wrote this really beautiful piece about not wanting to reject the part of themselves that identified as a woman, but also being able to explore being more than just that, and queering that identity as a more active process. And it was just, one of the most beautiful and important things I think I've ever read. And I think it was an Instagram post essay type thing that just, from that point on, I was like, no, this is this is right for me. There's like someone out there who understands me and who sees me and like who gets what it's like to have this kind of identity and then see the world in this way. And I think it's really beautiful in terms of, you know, part of why we need art. And I think this is something that Luciana said earlier, is that, you know, you, by giving yourself permission to be vulnerable, you give others that permission. And because we experience, you know, there's billions of people on this planet and we all experience the world in our own unique way. And we need art in order to sometimes show people and connect with people, you know, in, you know, those far off corners that, you know, see the world sometimes a little bit more like we do and help us feel seen in that process and in that way. So yeah, I was definitely like connecting with the idea of, you know, reading something and finally for the first time feeling seen there. Max, in terms of like on this topic, I have a question for you. So you said you're kind of a newspaper junkie and you working and that sort of inspired like the working in collage, but what draws you to particular images to use in your work there? You know, how do you go through the process of kind of selecting those to go out? Do you go with a theme in mind, or, you know, what's your process there?
So there's been different ways that I you know approach certain topics. There is one in particular that hit me because I thought I needed. It's funny, we were just talking about identity and as an artist, as an individual, because there was a scenario a couple of years back where I had to look at my own violence. I had to look at my own meanness, because a friend of mine let me know, help me accountable. You know, Max, you may not realize the ways that you can be mean, and it really put me in a place where, like, me mean, you know, like I didn't want to see that, and I thought, all right, what's that resistance about? You know, why don't I want to see that in myself? So I delved into all the clippings that I had, and I decided, all right, let me make one. It's fascinating I'm talking about this now because it's basically I'm kind of like critiquing my own violence, and that's one of the pieces that I submitted because it was really painful. It was really painful to do because I grabbed really chaotic pieces from mostly Time Magazine, Newsweek, and I think like a few New York Times magazines that come in every Sunday. And
Yeah.
I flipped through them and I thought, which are the ones that made me feel like uncomfortable, and examine that. And then and after about a 4-month process, I came up with this one right here, which kind of has a little bit of everything in it, but it basically is one of the more easier ones that I've done because it's more like decollage. It's not collage where it's like all these images attacking you at once. There are some spaces that are black and white in the background. So that's where I wanted to live. I was like, all right, let me live in those spaces so I could observe the ways that I'm mean. And so it was very interesting, and it really helped me grow a lot. So I guess to answer your question, I kind of like look for the ones that make me feel certain things, but the things that I don't know, why are you making me feel that? Why is this image bringing this up? I gotta put it in. You know, I gotta find out what's that thing that makes you feel that. And so that's what came out of that. The HIV one, like I said, I clipped it out of a lot of magazines that were just sitting in the waiting room of the AIDS Services Organization. There's just different processes for each one, but I do notice is that when I start cutting newspapers, I'm looking at the images that I think I may end up using later on.
Yeah.
Kind of like this predictive kind of situation where I'm like going through all these images and just kind of like assuming what I'm going to be using. Sometimes I'll go back to a magazine that I completely tore up and grab images that I didn't even realize the first time around. So it really is kind of like the frame of mind I'm in. But I look for chaos. Whatever it is that I feel like I can make chaos, something painful and comfortable, put it in a collage, and out of that, comfort, healing will arise, will grow.
I love that.
I'd love to hear a little bit about. I know we're getting close to 2:50, Miranda. Do you have time for one more question?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one or two more questions. And then again, anyone who is watching right now, feel free to comment, add your thoughts here, ask your questions, and we're more than happy to answer them. It's okay going a couple minutes over time too. So, don't feel like you're too late. So yeah, but Luciana, the mic is all yours.
Yeah. So So I actually have a question. I think it's for all of you, but definitely also for Joe and Charlotte about, how do you feel that like gender plays a role in your work? Both gender, but also your identity. When we think about identities, I mean, based on a lot of the work that I do, women feminism, but also the idea of feminism and like that. I always feel that like gender violence plays a role on our artwork as creatives, and especially like I am interested in hearing a little bit of that. And again, I keep going back to like, the both of the works that also has a lot of nature involved, or has both of you mentioned words that have to do with the world and nature as an expression to Jewel to talk, I mean, Charlotte to talk about your work, but like Jewel is a big part of your work. So I want to hear a little bit about that. Jewel, you can go first. Sorry. I keep forgetting I have to call somebody.
Can you repeat the last part of your question? I don't know, but my computer is like it's doing something stupid. Can you repeat the last part?
Yes. So I guess it's two into one question, but one is like about how do you feel that like, your gender identity, but also, and when you think about yourself as a female body, like person, how did that plays a role into your work, as in relationship to violence in the world outside, and the way you created your work as well in terms to identity. So I want to hear a little bit from all of you on that, but I want to hear Joe first.
When I create work against the violence, I like to just paint girls because I feel like girls are like the most attacked, whether they're like trans or they're girl, and they always get like attacked the most because we're supposed to be vulnerable. We're supposed to be like, there's like this whole stereotype of like, a girl. So I like to like go against that. So every time I paint, she's curvaceous, she's a girl, she has curly, beautiful, big hair, because that's like the most stereotypes that are like bashed and attacked. So I like to really focus on the girls because we be going through it with society.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's awesome. I think like I'm still going through a process of like celebrating my femininity and not trying to like hide that and put up this front of being like more, I don't know, strong or whatever, like, which I feel like is stereotypically like more masculine. So that's why I turned to paint the female bodies more too.
Max, I know you talked a little bit about vulnerability and sensibility and sometimes as well, and it's amazing. And that's what I think it's. I think when I think about art against violence, I think, and again going back to vulnerability, but also gender identity, and how that plays a role even in the ability to be vulnerable, even as we're looking at ourselves and we know that our work is it's a part of us, and how we're putting to the world, and like also this awareness of the audience.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to take up space here. I think it's I try to be very conscious about stuff like that, but I do think that let me hold myself accountable here. I made a video, a Facebook Live a couple days ago, inviting folks to this conversation, and I'm going to put you on blast a little bit, Miranda. And I use she, her, hers pronouns for Miranda in the live video, and I only noticed it afterwards, and then I like, instead of deleting it, I put a correction and I put it in a comment, and I said I made sure I held myself accountable. But that's kind of violent. No, that's like, when I think when that happens and we let that go, that's also violence, right? No, I don't know. Like, push back on me, but I think that the stuff we're talking about here, I think is important to be able to kind of like unpackage sometimes because we don't do that enough. So, and on some level, honestly, I think I'm a they as well, and I mess up. So I'm like going through my own journey of like self-discovery and all of this. So I guess the way I would put it is that be aware of the space that you take. And I'm speaking as a cisgender man here. Be aware of the space you take, but also allow yourself to adapt, to evolve, to change in the spaces that you are. And I think that you end up finding a place if you really allow yourself to be open. So I'm feeling like I'm there. I'm holding myself accountable because I don't always get it right. And I also am okay with folks holding me accountable, letting me know, yo, like there's this thing you said, and I like to talk about it. Let's do it. So, and for me, I think art has a way of doing that. So as I'm entering this gender nonconforming space, I'm discovering things about myself, it's going to the art that I'm going to create into the future.
Right. Well, and I think when you talk about gender, you'll have to be aware of like the non-binary social construct. There are all these things that we need to be aware too. And I think, as we're saying, it is a journey. As we're learning to navigate through our own identities, also kind of fighting against the violence that society has created. That we must, that there is just this one way, these two ways, and when really there isn't. And it's a process, and I think yes, I mean I have to hold myself accountable sometimes too as I learn. I mean, even talking about feminism, understanding the intersect, understanding the violent history of feminism towards trans community, and that towards Black and Latino women. So there's a lot to unpack and to honor. And you're right. I think I think that's what I'm grateful for, conversations like this, but also the art, because the art is like something that we can really, it's vulnerable and it forces us to really have these conversations.
Yeah. And I just wanted to step in there and say, like, first off, thank you for the accountability. I think that an interesting thing that you brought up there is that, we've got to all hold ourselves constantly accountable. And in a weird way, part of, coming to terms with both, my identity as a woman, and someone who, because of how society is structured, is, potentially experiencing a lot more violence, but also as a white woman who is shielded from violence in a lot of ways because of that. And, my non-binary identity is that, not only does that sometimes subject me to violence, but also it sometimes, is a framework for me to hold myself accountable, for sometimes the ways in which, I've, been in classes and talked over other women, especially women who aren't as, privileged as I am, and, can perform masculinity in the way that, is unhealthy. And that even, someone who's like a completely cisgender, straight, woman can also still, perform masculinity in a way that like harms other women around us. And so, for me, part of, the framework of being non-binary is, embracing that other side of me, but also holding that side of me accountable. And I really appreciate the sort of like message of accountability there, for, the acts of violence that we all experience and also contribute to in our own lives. And that's this kind of duality there. And I really appreciate Charlotte and Jewel for you being so vulnerable in terms of talking about violence against women and femmes and girls, and how you want to sort of like center those folks in your art. And Charlotte, I really appreciate the journey towards embracing femininity and being able to kind of celebrate femininity in your work. So, any closing remarks from any of you? I'll start it off with Luciana, and then we can work away from Max to Charlotte to Jewel.
Wait, what?
Oh, it's it's been a week. It's been a month. It's been a year. Yeah.
Mm.
So any closing remarks? Beginning with you, Luciana, and I was going to work our way kind of in a little circle back to Julie.
I'm just very happy to be in this space. I am always incredibly humbled and honored to talk to people, to artists, creatives, to human beings that are willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to navigate through tough conversations and create spaces where both discourse can happen, but also hold each other, in ways that it's kind of like we're leading by example. We're creating something and talking, and I just feel very lucky to be in this space to listen to the artists, to see Max again and Miranda again and talk more. Very exciting to learn more about Jewel and Charlotte's work and who they are, and I am just very thankful for that. So wish that we had more than an hour.
Well, we can all definitely keep in touch, group emails, all of that, and highly encourage everyone who hasn't seen the show to get see it. The banner should be popping up on the screen, hopefully. But yeah, and then Max, is there anything that you wanted to end
on? Again, creation. Our existence is resistance, and when we create, that force is the response to destruction. So keep creating, keep making, keep building, and we'll be living in those spaces. So thank you so much for not just let's just celebrate each other. We're badass artists here in this conversation, and this conversation will resonate, and we will create more. But in this moment, how about we just appreciate that we're here together, and I just feel the love. So thank you so much for this.
Absolutely. Charlotte?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for including me. I feel so inspired by being a part of this conversation and listening to all of you artists talk about your work and the goals of this whole exhibit. So thank you.
I just want to thank you guys for letting me become a part of this, because I've never been a panelist before, and I was so nervous to join this call because I was like, I'm going to say one thing, I'm not going to have anything to say, but it was actually really welcoming, and I like you guys for that.
Well, thank all of you so much. Just to close us out, I'm Miranda. I'm the LGBTQ Women's Program Officer at the Human Pride Center, in case you all didn't know that already. And thank you all so much for sharing the space today and for bringing yourselves, your whole selves, your vulnerable selves to this conversation. And for both sharing your art and your voices here. You all did amazing jobs as panelists and as an amazing co-facilitator. Thank you so much, Luciana. Could not have done this without you. So thank you. Thank you all so much for being present for this. I just really appreciate you. Again, please go see our amazing show. You can watch it on YouTube, or you can take an in-person tour by making a reservation at newhavenpricecenter.org. And with that, that concludes our Artist Talk for Art Against Violence. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Goodbye.